Like many people, I often pray and hope for, even expect, almost immediate answers to my prayers, only to learn that often answers don't come on my timetable. God's responses to many of our needs seem to be either non-existent or significantly delayed. However, in God's infinite wisdom, I believe His timing is unfailing. Sometimes it's years later that things we have prayed for actually materialize. In my view, those providential experiences of exquisite timing can only come from a God who knows us and knows what we need at a particular juncture in our lives. Chapter 4 is entitled God Revealed According to His Timing. Perhaps the most dramatic example in chapter 4 is the story I call the miracles of childbirth and adoption. Even before our marriage, Sue and I shared a love of children and a strong desire to raise a family. Unfortunately, we found we were unable to conceive a child. It's difficult to fully express the emotional distress of realizing that one may never have children. We then embarked upon several years of medical testing, fertility treatments, and praying. And although we knew that God responds on an appropriate timetable, we were discouraged as the years continued to pass without a baby. At the time, we lived in Detroit, and for many months, I had been going across town to Dr. Robert Leach at a clinic in Beaumont Hospital for testing and for fertility treatments. And after having no success, he and I agreed to discontinue those treatments. And you know, agreeing with Dr. Leach to give up my fertility treatment was doubly troubling for me as a Christian. I felt I was giving up on God. Dr. Leach then recommended we try in vitro fertilization using my own sperm. And those attempts also met with failure. Finally, we made the tough decision to try in vitro fertilization with a donor sperm. And even that failed. After so many failed attempts, we began the effort to adopt, which is something we had planned to do anyway. And after many months, our excitement mounted as we awaited the arrival of our Korean daughter, Heidi. In a year or so, the joys we experienced in raising Heidi encouraged us to initiate the adoption process once again. And in 1979, we adopted Dina, a 5-month-old Korean orphan. The adoptions of Heidi and Dina were followed by a local adoption in 1983 of a special needs infant, Denise, at age 2.5. After the adoptions, the stress over our infertility was long forgotten when we were surprised by a true miracle. After 16 years of marriage and 3 adoptions, God blessed us with Sue's pregnancy and the birth of Zachary in 1986, and a short 18 months later, along came the miracle of Corey, Zach's brother. The joy and wonder over these gifts from God is difficult to put into words. There was no question in our minds that God had finally answered our prayers, but in His perfect timing, not in ours. Ironically, after these rapid-fire miracles, Sue and I agreed that 5 children was enough, and a very short 5 weeks after Corey's birth, along came the miracle of a vasectomy. You know, God most definitely has a sense of humor. The urologist that was recommended to me to perform that vasectomy was across town in the same building and on the same floor as Dr. Leach. In a large metropolitan area like Detroit, the odds of that occurring were nearly zero. I viewed this uncanny coincidence as a reminder from God that births of Zach and Corey were true miracles and delayed answers to prayer. On the day of the vasectomy, I visited Dr. Leach to disclose this remarkable news. And after a few long seconds of speechless, wide-eyed amazement, he congratulated me and without further comment, returned to his patients. How odd, I thought, that he didn't say much in response to our miracle. Maybe he wasn't ready to admit that he had failed where only God could succeed. And you might be surprised to hear that I believe that the real blessing in this story is not the birth of the boys, but rather the temporary infertility. That infertility triggered our efforts to adopt, and that allowed us to experience the miracles of Heidi and Dina and Denise. I asked my readers if there have been times in their lives when they reached out to God in prayer but felt their prayers went unheard or unanswered. I asked them if they can now see and admit in hindsight that God had it right, and that perhaps at the time they simply weren't being patient and waiting for the Lord. Chapter 4 of my book tells a number of stories of God's perfect timing in my life.